Hey everyone, Connie from The Painted Photographer. I'm back to give you another little video on Sonnet's Maker's Box. Sonnet sends out a monthly subscription box to everyone who is on her list, and she also gives you a great video on how you can do some of the things with the items that are in there. And then she has quite a few of us influencers that also make videos. So we have a playlist today, and I hope you'll follow through with the rest of the playlist. It's listed in the description below, and there's a lot of very, very creative people that are showing you how they use some of the supplies in Sonnet's box. The monthly subscription was just opened up, and I believe it opens up again in February. So if you missed it this time, make sure you go and subscribe to Sonnet's channel so you'll be able to get your name on the wait list for the next time that she has her Maker's Box up for subscriptions. So I went ahead and used a few of these items in different ways and some in pretty standard ways. And you can do whatever you want with them. It really is a box of creativity that is going to bring you out of your comfort zone, which it brings me out of my comfort zone, and you'll have some fun with it. So if you haven't gotten the box, sign up. Welcome back, friends. This is Connie from The Painted Photographer, and for today's video I'm going to show you how I do some projects with Sonnet's Maker's Box. This is her September box, and when you open them up, the first thing you're going to see is a thank you card, and on there is all the different products that are within this box. Here's the first Roycycled paper. It's Autumn Masterboard, and then we also have Autumn Flannel, which are perfect. They go great together. And then my papers, The Painted Photographer, we have Pumpkin Patch here, and then we also have Autumn Light here, which is a fun lantern that I painted. And for a thank you, Sonnet sent along 2 napkins this time, which are beautiful. You could decoupage those onto many different items. They're just absolutely gorgeous napkins. And I like that Highland cow. He is so fun. Then we have a milk paint called Willow. And we have another little thank you. Sonnet was very generous this time and gave another little thank you. It's a bracelet that is engraved. Stamped, not engraved, stamped. So that was a fun little surprise. And then we have the 2 fusion paints that we have here. One is a blue color and one is a brown color. And then we have the 2 DIY paints, Summer Crush and Farm Fresh. So that's what's in your Maker's Box, and we're going to get some projects started here. So the first thing I have up is this little oak box. I knew when I found this at the thrift store that it just needed a little love, and so I grabbed it, and the first thing that when I opened it up, it had this piece of flannel on the inside. So I'm like, oh, we have some flannel in the Maker's Box. Let's change that out. And so I went ahead and just looked over the box and made sure it doesn't have any dings or any damage or anything on it. And I wanted the piece of flannel for the inside of the box. So what I did is I took, and it would go around the entire box. And what I did is I just took the DIY white swan paint and I painted the entire box in the white swan, because if you use white paint underneath your decoupage paper, it's going to be that much brighter and you don't have to worry about it like melting right in with the wood color. So this has got just not a perfect finish on it. I don't need perfect. And the flannel that was at the bottom was loose. So I just pulled that out of there and used it as a good template for my autumn flannel paper that was in the Sonnet's Maker's Box. So I just put that on there and drew a quick template of the back of the flannel on the back of the decoupage paper. And I drew a quick line on there and just cut that out. Now we're going to put the flannel on the bottom of the box. I painted the bottom of the box white, not a very good coat. You don't need it to be perfect. And then I misted my paper so that it's nice and stretched so that it fits the bottom of the box. And then I went ahead and I just pulled up the corner of one side and put down some DIY's liquid patina, which is my favorite decoupage medium that I use, and I flipped that paper right back on top of it and then smoothed it back out with the brush and the decoupage liquid patina. And I just went ahead and did the entire bottom of the box with this paper, just smoothing it out, going along as I went, just until I got to the opposite end of the box. So now this paper is on the bottom of the box, and it's going to match very, very well and be kind of a fun pop of something different when they actually open up this treasure box. When you're working with stripes, you really have to be careful so that the stripes are straight. So you want some type of a marking of some sort so that you make sure that you get your stripes straight when you're putting it on something else, which is why it's kind of tough to be using stripes and making sure that it's straight. So what I did is I just cut this a little bit bigger than the top of my box, and then I was putting it on the inside lid of the box. And I cut out the space for the hinges and shoved that paper down inside there. You gotta kind of manipulate it. Just depends on where you're putting this paper. You have to be very patient. So just take your time. You'll get it. It goes around most surfaces. And then I went ahead and misted that paper and decoupaged it onto the lid of the box, making sure that I was careful when I pulled it all up. I did it this way first, and then I'm like, oh, that's going to be tough to stick that back in there again when I got the decoupage medium on there. So I pulled it back this way and just did the entire lid of the box, and then I laid it back down and smooth that all out. I do have some wrinkles in it, so I used my plastic from the actual paper that it came in, the Royce paper. And so I went ahead and flipped it up to the back of the box, and then decoupaged that little lip on there that I would have missed from the front. So it's all completed, and I have a few bubbles. I'm just squishing them out with my paintbrush and putting a good coat of liquid patina on top. So that is the inside of the makers, or the jewelry box. And so we just have one piece of flannel on the inside, and we're going to add flannel to the entire outside of the box. So I want to make sure that the three sides, it goes around for all three sides. So I'm making sure that I cut a good piece of the tissue paper, and I don't have to use all of this, and if I put it on there I'm going to waste it because I'm going to mist my paper. So I made sure that I cut off what I didn't need so that I could save it for future projects, because it's really, tissue paper, the recycled paper, is good for all of your mixed media projects and whatever else you have going on. So I always store my brushes in some cling wrap, and between my projects I misted just the edge of my paper there, and then making sure that my stripes were straight, I adhered it to the side of the box, and I tucked it into those little grooves that are on there using the plastic wrap to help me not tear it with my fingers, and then went over it with the liquid patina. Now I'm going to mist as I go along and bring that liquid patina along that box, and making sure that I don't have any wrinkles and that I actually get it in all of those grooves. Those grooves were a little challenging. They would kind of rip and tear once in a while, but I was going to distress this box anyway, so it was not going to be an issue. So I finished going around the entire outside of that box using that same technique. I had to let this box dry in sections because there were so many different areas that I had to decoupage on this box. So I let this completely dry overnight, and then I came back and used my 220 grit sandpaper and went and sanded the edges off where the paper was nice and dry. Whenever you sand your decoupage paper, you want to make sure that it is really dry, or you will have a mess if it's not completely dry. So I'm sanding off all of the edges, and so far it is working just fine. All of those edges are coming off really nice. You want to sand in a downward motion so that it comes all off. And then this back piece, that was a little challenging, but it came off, and I'm going to put the flannel paper on the back side as well, but I just needed a sharp edge to have that come down too. So now the lid of the box, the bottom side of the lid of the box, I had to also remove the paper from that too. For this box, we're going to go with the Autumn Masterboard. There are so many good spots on this Autumn Masterboard that could have worked perfectly for this top of this box. But what I ended up choosing is I do like those postage stamps. Not so crazy about the butterflies, but I do like this sunflower for autumn. So I went ahead and decided, okay, this is the design that I'm going to use. Now, which way am I going to use it? So I did like it in this portrait position versus the landscape. And then the birds I was cutting off. But you can see on the top part of that masterboard that Royce used this flannel underneath that deer part. And I'm like, wait a minute, we got some strips that could work very well with this. So let's just make it kind of like a mixed media. I did end up using this sunflower look. I don't like that butterfly, and I'm not crazy about those birds. So we're going to fix this all up. And I love the birds and the butterfly, I just don't like where they're placed on this box. So I'm going to show you how I revamped this paper and got it to look the way I wanted it to. So the first thing I did is I just kind of made an edge with my fingers on the top of the box and then cut out the paper to the edge that I was making from the top of the box. And these birds, I love the birds, but I want to not use them on this project. So I'm going to cut actually around them and not put them on the top of this box. So there's the first paper that I'm going to decoupage on there. And then I'm going to use some of this flannel paper because Royce was already kind of doing that for us and making us realize that we could put the flannel with this paper, which I think is really, really kind of a fun concept. And so I misted the paper, and then I'm going to decoupage this paper onto the lid of this box. Okay, I changed my mind. I'm going to actually use my distressed stamp, my IOD distressed stamp, and my IOD black ink. If you do not have any of these stamps, you can find them on my website at thepaintedphotographer.com, along with the ink and other products. So I stamped this distressed onto the top of the box because the decoupage paper is kind of see-through, so you're going to see some of that ink coming through, which it's going to add some grunge look to this paper, which I really like. I've done this a couple of times with the crackle stamp, and now I decided to do it with the distress stamp, and I really, really like it. So I've kind of been obsessed with putting texture underneath the paper, and so you can see it coming through. So I went ahead and laid this all down and flipped it up. That was a starter strip, so I knew exactly where I wanted this to go. And then I went ahead and added the DIY's liquid patina to the rest of this area and laid it back down, making sure that it didn't have any wrinkles. And I just love those sunflowers. They are beautiful. And then with that little bit of distress in the background, it turned out so good. I just absolutely love it. So I used my plastic wrap that the paper came in, which is, don't throw that away. That works really good for making sure that you're not going to rip the paper with your fingers. And then I had a straight edge on my flannel. So I'm going to lay that down there like that And we're going to finish the rest of this box with the flannel paper. So I laid that down there using my starter strip and decoupaged it onto the lid of the box in the same way. And I just kind of butted the papers up next to each other. The flannel is overlapping the other one just a tiny, tiny bit. You can see it there with the butterfly's wing, how with a tiny bit it's overlapping. And then I just made sure that I had liquid patina on my edges and laid that all down using my plastic wrap to make sure that I don't rip it with my fingers. And getting that all in there and then going over the top with the DIY's liquid patina, which also can be found on my website. And it is a fantastic decoupage medium. I've really, really enjoyed using it. After that was all done, I really liked these postage stamps. So I went ahead and did a wet tear method. So you get your paintbrush in water and then on the tissue paper, and then you can just tear the design out of there. And it gives it kind of a, um, not a uniformed look. Like I'm not cutting it out. So it has some edges on it. If I don't want that butterfly to show, I have to protect it because obviously things are going to show through the tissue paper. So I added just a single coat of the DIY's White Swan, let it dry, and then I'm going to put the postage stamps right over top of that butterfly. And so I put them where I wanted, and I decoupaged. I put the liquid patina over top of the butterfly and then laid it back down and finished it up on the bottom. So that was a really fun look. I like that look much better than the butterflies in that location, and I like how I overlapped it over the two different papers. And then I kind of like these butterflies, so I am going to put those butterflies on there. I like the placement of these butterflies, um, and I like how it's got the extra dimensional look to it. So I put that on there, and it's got kind of a, I don't know, a vintage vibe to it. So I really like that look. Now to finish off this project, we did do all the sanding and we did decoupage the back side of this box, so it's all finished. And now I'm just going in with the DIY clear wax and going over top of the paper with the clear wax to give it a nice protect. It does have liquid patina on top of it already, so this is an extra protect. And why I'm adding an extra protect is because I'm going to dark wax this box and give it kind of an age to it. So I want that barrier between the dark wax and the paper. So this is the DIY dark wax, and I went along the edges just to give that some age and some depth, and leaving the center untouched. Came back with a soft paper towel and took all that extra grunge off, but it really made a huge difference to add some of that grunge to the flannel paper on the insides and the sides of the box, especially where those grooves were. It kind of stuck in those grooves and it gave it a lot of dimension. So here I'm doing the top of the box because I want all the papers to match. I don't want anything to be real unmatched. So I made sure that I did it on the sides and the tops of the box as well. So I'm just adding a few more grunge techniques. If you want anything to be a little bit more grungy, just go ahead and add more dark wax to it. Here we are on the sides of the box, and I'm adding the grunge to the outside edges, and you can see how that depth in there, like there was torn paper in there because of how it had to go into those crevices, and then the dark wax just stays stuck in there, which looked really good. Next up we have this just a smaller little box. I painted the top white before I actually took a picture of it, so imagine that it not being painted white. So the top of the box is painted in the DIY's White Swan before we get started here. And it's just a small little box. I don't know what it was used for. I found it at the thrift store. I painted it white, and now we're going to add my pumpkin patch pumpkin paper to it. I used a paper cutter because I could use a straight edge on this one. When you're cutting rice paper with a paper cutter, you want to make sure that you start in the middle of the paper and drag your cutter to the outside edges, because the paper is very, very thin and you're going to snag your paper a little bit easier if you start on one end and go all the way to the other. So I always pull my blade to the center of the paper and make it cut both edges. And it fits perfectly on the top of that box. And we went in with liquid patina, the same as with the Roycycled paper. You can do the same with rice papers and make a starter strip on one side of the paper and lay it all down, getting out your bubbles. You're going to have less bubbles with rice paper than you do with the Roycycled paper because it's just a tad thicker and it has some natural fibers in it. And you're going to push that down and seal it all in and then let that dry. I have the two colors here, DIY colors, Skeleton Key and Farm Fresh. Both of them are kind of a grayish blue. I wanted to make sure that I had the best match that I could. I ended up using the Farm Fresh, which is also one of the colors in your maker's box. And it does not have the greatest coverage on the first swipe through. You can see that it's very, very thin. Don't let that discourage you. This is a beautiful color. And then I took the Farm Fresh and I went around the outside because I did not like that white edge. So I'm just stippling, which is just pouncing my brush over top of this paper and everything. Then I took a fusion paint that was from an old maker's box and it was white. So I thought that I would add some of that to blend that in with the background that was already on the papers. And I just, using the Farm Fresh brush, and the white fusion paint, I just blended that right in as best I could, making it look like it was all one solid top. I had some leftover crinoline too, and I just wanted that white not to be so white. So I went in with some crinoline and pounced on top of that as well to just mute that white down a little bit and give it more of a fall vibe. Because right now, your whites aren't as white as they should be right now. They're just on the muted side, which helps with the fall decor. Next up, we're going to add some texture. I like the texture on the top just from pouncing. We're going to add some texture to the side of this box. So I use my Saltwash, which you can also find at thepaintedphotographer.com. And it is a texture medium that goes right into your DIY paint or whatever type of paint you're using. And it just gives it a little stiffness to it. And you can actually make some pretty good brush strokes or stipple marks when you're painting using this thicker paint. So I went ahead and put this Saltwash paint on here and took my brush and just kind of pounced with my brush, making some peaks and valleys and just some good texture marks versus this just being a plain old flat box. And it's going to give it a lot more character if you actually add some texture to it. And this Saltwash is an amazing product. If you don't have Saltwash in your creative stash, you probably should get some because I use Saltwash very, very often just to add texture to my items and give them a little bit more character. And then when you either dark wax or you put another coat of paint over it, you're going to really notice that texture. Now what we want to do, I sanded all the edges down and I exposed some of that bare wood. It also took the top coat off on some of those edges so that the dark wax that I'm going to use can absorb in there. You can see where this paint is getting a little bit darker. Those are some of the spots that the sander took off. So you want to make sure that you do give this a nice good clear coat of wax because where those dark edges are, there's no protect after I hit it with the sander. So now we're going to go in with the dark wax and I'm going to hit those edges. Why I hit it with the sander after it's been painted and sealed is because if you seal in that bare wood, then it won't dark wax very well. So I always like to make sure the wood is bare, and so that I can get some of that dark wax to absorb into that bare wood. And I went ahead and I took off the dark wax. With DIY wax, you don't have to be real cautious of getting it off real soon. It will come off as easy as pie. The next, I dark waxed the inside of the box just to give it a more finished look. You don't have to do this part if you don't mind the unfinished look, or I could have painted it. But what I decided to do is just give it a coat of dark wax and then call it finished. Next up, we have this metal envelope. I found it at the thrift store. It was kind of interesting. Would be great for holding mail or being at a cabin or something with some of this paper that Royce has. So I took this S off of it. Must have been someone's last name. And I grabbed that, took that off of there, and then I just went ahead and added some white swan to the back side of this envelope. And we're going to use some paper on the back side of this envelope. That is why I'm using this white paint to seal that all up, so it actually, the paper is like has all of its colors shining through as bright as it can, because I really don't want this paper to melt away into the metal. So I'm adding the white color. So the Autumn Master Board has some really, really good designs in it. So I was trying to figure out which one I liked best. I do like this deer. I do like the entire tree, but he would be stuck too far into the envelope if I wanted to use any more of that tree. So his legs are naturally cut off. That's where Royce had positioned him. So that's what I'm using, and I'm tucking his legs into that envelope there and just using a little bit of that tree to poke out on top there. And so that I think is going to be perfect. These are the two fusion paints that we're going to get in this September Makers box. So this blue really matches that blue in that tree up there, and the brown really matches the deer. So I was really torn as to which one I was going to use, but it's fall, guys, so we're going to go ahead and use this brown. Maybe we're going to come back and use that blue in a little bit, but right now we're going to use this brown on the rest of the envelope and sealing up that metal look to this envelope, and we're going to just give it a nice facelift with some fusion paint. The fusion paint will stick really, really well to this metal, and it also has really good coverage on the first coat, but I made sure that I put two, I think I almost put 3 coats on this letter holder, just because I had a little oops, so I had to use a 3rd coat. Here is my second coat on this of this same color onto the envelope, and you can see that I had heat dried this envelope, and my paint is drying as I put it onto the envelope. So don't do what I did and let that metal dry before you actually put more paint on it, because it'll dry and then you'll really see those brush strokes. So that is one of the areas that I messed up with and had to give it another coat of paint to cover up some of those wonky brush strokes that I had. But then I also had, I didn't take care of this that was on the envelope before I started to paint. There was a couple little high ridged pieces. I don't know what they were, some kind of contamination, debris of some sort that was on the envelope. So I took a piece of sandpaper and I sanded them off so that they were flat. You can still see them areas, which is fine with me, but at least they're not sticking out where someone's going to pick at them and then the paint is going to be gone. That's what I didn't want, is I didn't want the paint to be gone. So that was the second area that I messed up. And so now I'm taking some of that white paint off, because when I use liquid patina, I'm going to seal in that white paint. So I wanted to make sure I took off as much of that white paint as I could so that this has got a nice finished look to it. There, the paint is all done. I'm going to tuck in this little deer on the back side. He looks so good already. The color is a perfect match. Royce does such a good job with the papers, and then Sonnet does a good job matching the colors up with the papers that you're going to get in this month's box, in every month's box. She does a really, really good job. You can tell that she takes all of her time and care and love put into every single one of these boxes. So I went ahead and placed the deer there, and taking my starter strip, I'm going to add some liquid patina and smooth it out right here and pull that paper back. When I go to add my next liquid patina, I don't ever go with my full paintbrush next to the paper. You want to make sure that you just gradually move up to your paper, and when your paintbrush is full of liquid patina, don't touch your paper. Just go when it's not quite so full, because you will have a ridge on your paper if you go with a full brush. So I'm going to make sure that all of my wrinkles are out, and then I had this hole at the top, which I'm going to have to make sure that that hole is open in case they want to hang it on a hook. So I took my scissors and made that hole. Then I'm going to get a little bit closer here, guys, for you to see, because I actually had to take my paintbrush and push around that rivet so that the paper would form around that rivet. So it took a little bit of finessing to get that paper to go around that rivet, but it looks so much better than having a bubble there. You don't want a bubble, so just keep working that paper. It'll go. It's just going to take a little bit of patience. Now I let this dry. And after it had dried, I didn't like this white down below. I think I'm going to use this for holding some dried floral. So it's not going to matter to me, but if anybody ever wants to pull that dried floral off and use it as a mail holder, I just didn't like that white sticking out there. So I went ahead and painted that solid color on the bottom of his feet down there. So I took a piece of sandpaper and pull it in a downward motion. I'm pulling this paper off of the edge to make a nice clean edge. And after I got that all done, I thought, I still have some of that white paint coming through, and I don't like it. So I took some of the fusion paint and went over the edge, making sure that gave it a more finished look. It's all in the details, guys. You really have to make sure that you have the details, because that's where it's at. And then I used a baby wipe to wipe off some of that liquid, or that fusion paint. And when it was still wet, and it wipes off just fine because there is liquid patina on the paper. The next thing we have to do to this is add the details. It's all about the small little details that you think, oh, that's not going to matter, but really it does. So what I did is I painted this little apothecary spot with some white swan paint. And then I took my IOD apothecary letter stamp set, which can be found on my website. This is an amazing set. It's got the smallest little letters in a couple different sizes, and you can usually find the set that works for your project you're working on. I spelled the word hunt. I didn't want this to say letters or mail or anything like that. I wanted it to just be generic, and I can see this going into someone's cabin. So I put them on my thin mount, a little piece of thin mount, and then used my IOD black ink, stamped it up, and then I put some liquid patina on top of this paint because it is not sealed like the fusion. Then I went and took my IOD crackle stamp And this one can be found also on my website, but now it's in vintage textures and there's multiple textures. But this is my go-to stamp for everything. And I just added a little bit of crackle to the background of that deer decoupage paper, and it gives it some age character and just a little bit another texture layer. And he's really starting to look cute. But these are all those fine details that sometimes people do and they don't show it to you. So today I'm showing you how I get those extra fine little details. So now, since this is done with Fusion paint and everything is sealed with liquid patina, I can go right over top of the project with some dark wax. So I'm aging up this metal envelope with the dark wax, and then I'm taking a soft cloth and I'm wiping it back, leaving the dark to stay in all the crevices and just age that metal up a little bit. So then you can see the difference between the side and the top. So I go ahead and age those sides as well. Even though there's not very many crevices, it still adds the look to it. And then I took the dark wax and I went over top of the decoupage paper, kind of on the edges of it where it would be touched and just kind of grungy, and just slightly dark waxed it over top of the deer. And it looks fantastic, guys. I'm really, really pleased with this project. I wasn't sure how this was going to turn out, but I think it's really cool. And then I just buffed off some of that wax, and it gave it just a nice aged rustic look versus the brand newsies that you might find in the store. So I have those holes in the front. Didn't want to tie something on there. I kind of like the word hunt being the focal point. So my husband said, how about if I give you some shells and you paint those up and we glue those onto the front? Perfect. So I use pennies from heaven, and I went ahead and added copper paint to those shells so they weren't so brand new, and then also some dark wax. I also snuck a little piece of that fusion blue into the project. So make sure you check it out and see if you can find where I snuck that little color of blue fusion paint in, and let me know in the comments if you find it. For our next project, I have just this breadboard. It was a thrifted breadboard, probably cost me like 98 cents or something, and it just needs a different use. So I went ahead and I painted this breadboard just with white swan. You've seen me do this a number of times throughout this video and many others. You just want this white coat underneath your paper. So we are using one of my Painted Photographer papers, and this is Autumn Light. It was a full sheet, so I'm ripping the edges so that I don't have the straight edges like the last one that I used. And I just went around and ripped off all that white so that the white wasn't a problem when it was a bit on the short side. If it was a little longer, I wouldn't have went and did that. I'd have sanded it off. But it was a bit on the smaller side, so I wanted to make sure that it had a nice kind of a edge on it. I misted my paper so that I could make sure that it stayed in that position and it stretched a little bit. Because if you add water to paper, it's going to stretch, and adding the liquid patina on top of it is going to help that paper stretch, but the water will give you a first stretch. So it just missed that paper and it makes your process a lot easier. I went over the top with liquid patina to seal everything in, and then I let it dry. After everything was all dried up, I used my DIY clear wax and I went over the top of the entire painting and the paper and gave it a nice clear coat of clear wax so that it would be a good protect. Then I'm using what's called the DIY dark dust. I can control this dust a little bit more than I can the wax. I just dip my brush in there and I put the dust onto the project, And what's happening is the dust is kind of like melting into the clear wax, and you can just control it a little bit better. I wanted to make a shadow on the one side of the lantern, like there would probably be a shadow on one side versus the other. So I'm making just a bit of a shadow, and using this dark dust method, I can control it a little bit more than I can the dark wax. So same process though, we're going to buff that off, and so that it doesn't look too blotchy, we're going to just melt it right into the clear wax. And if you want to add more, you certainly can. Otherwise, your projects are complete. And if you want to brighten some areas up, just add a little bit of the clear wax, and you can take some of that dark off of there and brighten it back up again. So I am going back in with the dark wax on the back side. It's just a bit easier of a process, and the dark dust matches the dark wax. So you'd never know that there were two different waxes used on this board. With these rice papers, they are perfect as a standalone, or they can also be combined with a mixed media art that you're doing. So if you like this one, you can look forward to more papers in your Sonnets Makers box. Otherwise, I do have retailers that sell my rice papers. You can look for one of the retailers and they will ship them right to your front door, or you can pick them up in their booth. I also have them listed on my website at thepaintedphotographer.com. In the Maker's Box, Sonnet always gives you a fun little gift. And for this month, it was a stamped bracelet by Sonnet herself, and then also these two napkins. Napkins are another easy item that you can decoupage onto just about anything. I just chose some square boards that I had laying around in my stash, and I'm going to make 4 of these boards for my shop. I took the crackle stamp, which you can find it now using vintage textures, and I stamped underneath the napkin, and then I'm just kind of wiping it off because I didn't want it to be too bold, but I did want that crackle on there. And I used the DIY liquid patina and just placed that napkin right on top, and took liquid patina and went over the top of the napkin. Same process as the decoupage paper, and you're just using a napkin which is a bit on the thinner side. So be careful so that you don't tear it. So the napkin is really thin, so that crackle is going to shine through some of that napkin design, and you'll actually see that crackle coming through. I used that plastic wrap to help protect the napkin from tearing from my fingers. And then after they were dry, I sanded them all down, and I went over with clear wax just to give it a nice protect, because I am going to use some dark wax on these, and I wanted to make sure that they were protected enough for the dark wax. I didn't want that dark wax to soak into the paper. So here I am just putting the dark wax on the edges and the sides and the back side of the boards. And then I go and I add a little bit of the dark wax to the front of it also, just to age up those edges just a bit and give it some type of a depth. You can take a clean paper towel and wipe off some of that excess dark wax. And then I just wipe off the excess from the sides, and these blocks will be finished and ready for the shop. Here, these are stamped with the crackle stamp underneath the paper, so you can see it a little bit. And then the pictures at the end, I took the crackle stamp and stamped over top of the napkin. The decoupage napkins, or the thin napkins, you're going to see a bit of wrinkling with the napkins. So just embrace that as it's part of the process. It's a crafting process, and they look really cool with those wrinkles. Just, I don't mind them at all. So what'd you think of the video? Did you like it? Did you like some of the items that I fixed up? I know I did. Let me know in the comments your favorite. I am Connie the Painted Photographer. I do supply the papers that are in the Maker's Box, and they are exclusive to Sonnet's box, so you can't get them anywhere else. So if you want the papers, you'll have to sign up for the box. Otherwise, I do have Connie Lines and Designs. I have retailers all over, so you can find the link below to some of those retailers, and you can go shop at their stores, or you can find them on the website. Any of the products that I used here today, you'll find on my website at thepaintedphotographer.com, and you'll be able to have them shipped right to your front door. I also sell my products at Foreman's Farm Home in Medford, Wisconsin, north on Highway 13. You'll see the great big hardware store. That's where my stuff is. You can go on in, shop for what you want, and they are absolutely amazing people to work with. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember, subscribe, like, link, all the things. Ring the bell, all those things. And you won't miss a single episode. So until next time, happy painting. So also any of the product, I also sell my products at Medford's Foreman's Farm Home, and I have them. I also sell my products at Medford's Foreman's Farm Home. I also sell my products at Foreman's Farm Home in Medford, Wisconsin on South A Street. North on Highway 13.